Hi, Turtle.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm good.
Today we're here. This is Adrian, and I'm here with Turtle today. We're going to be talking a little tarot together with our tea on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And Turtle is a student of mine, an aspiring tarotist herself. And today she has a spread that she'd like to share and some interesting questions that we're going to talk about together. So, Turtle, tell me what's prompting your questions.
Well, I did a spread this morning that had the Justice card in it, and it. While I do have I think a pretty good understanding of what that card represents, I feel like there's similar themes in the Judgment card, and I thought maybe we could talk about what are the distinct differences between these cards, and why do I feel like there's similarities? Like, maybe you can help me explain why I might be getting confused there.
Yeah, sure. I think those two cards, just in the nature of what they're called, also sort of make that connection, justice and judgment. But I'm curious first. So, what are the similarities that you see in the cards? Because there are similarities. So, let's talk about those first.
Well, I guess, first the two words to me, justice and judgment, go hand in hand in, for example, the entire legal system that we know, right? To me, justice, if you think about it in the sense of justice being served or somehow being reached, sounds like a judgment. A judgment has been passed.
Mm-hmm.
That definition of what was right or wrong was handed out, or something like that. But I can also see, at least in justice, things are what they are. You sort of owning up to the choices that you've made, maybe that have brought you to the place that you are right now. Acceptance, perhaps.
You're saying that related to justice?
Yeah.
Okay. I would actually, those couple words that you just said right now, like seeing the choices that you've made and how they've led you to where you are and having that feeling of acceptance, I would actually assign that more to judgment than I would justice. So
Okay.
now we can start to see kind of the distinctions. What else do you see as similarities?
Oh, the number? I don't remember what the numbers of the cards are.
Yeah, you're on to something. The number of justice is
justice is 8, or no, 11.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
It is 8 in some of the older decks, like Crowley's deck. In Waite's deck, it's assigned to 11, which is reduced to a 2. Do you remember what the number for judgment is?
Is it 20?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Yeah, 2, balance, finding an even ground between yin and yang, or maybe even finding balance between our negative and positive energies or qualities.
Yeah. Or maybe even past decisions, as you mentioned a moment ago. So that element of balance and harmony becomes something that is important in both of those cards. But like you'll see in the Justice card, depending again on the deck and the particular kind of art that you're looking at, but typically you have sort of an austere-looking goddess figure, a feminine figure. Is that what your image is as well?
For justice or
Mm-hmm. Justice?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you see her typically holding a sword in one hand and oftentimes scales in the other. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the decks also depict her sitting on a platform of some sort, maybe, some sort of a throne. And then there is usually the motif of black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So even there, we have, not to go off too much on a tangent, but there we even have sort of this connection to the high priestess as well, which is also the number 2. The high priestess sits in that place as well between opposites. So that's a really common theme that we'll see in the cards, is the figure in the forefront between opposites of some sort. Mm-hmm. Right. And then when we have judgment, what's the difference in the judgment image that we see?
Well, so it's definitely different. There's more people involved. There's sort of a symbol of a higher being up in the sky. It may not even be the whole body, almost like in my personal deck, it's looks like kind of an angel.
Yeah.
So that implication of your higher self or the higher collective or
Good.
something along those lines. And then there's some little people who are definitely kind of looking up and almost asking to be touched by the light.
Good, good. So there you just depicted kind of the difference between the two as well. In Justice,
Okay.
we see a much more ego accessible card because we as the viewer identify with her. We stand before her. But what we see, as you pointed out, in the Judgment card is we see this divine messenger. It is an angel. In most decks, it's considered the Archangel Gabriel. And
Okay.
Gabriel is typically blowing his trumpet, to which there are figures, at least 3 to sometimes 6 figures that are rising up out of coffins. So just the energy of the cards is very different. One is more personal and one is more transpersonal. So now that just kind of having those two, looking at it through those two different lenses, the essence itself in terms of justice and judgment, where there is that similarity, now we start to feel the difference. And the difference might be more, justice or judgment, we'll use the words interchangeable for the moment, might be more assigned to the ego, that sense of self, where what would you think now if we said that this is more transpersonal? We have the angel. What kind of justice or judgment is it assigned to?
To the collective.
Yeah, and or maybe the soul on some level, right? We have those images rising up out of the coffin suggest in some way that there is, a rebirth or an awakening, a rise to the call of that trumpet. And if you're familiar at all with any, biblical mythology or even, further mythology than that, what motif do we see in that? What does that draw to your mind?
The biblical motif?
Yeah, biblical or maybe even other mythological
Ascension,
motifs.
like ascension or, returning to the one, something like that, or
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more? You're on the right path for sure. What does that mean, ascension or returning?
enlightenment, like tapping back into your purest form.
Yeah. And even if we, take the idea of resurrection, right, and awakening, this drawing of ourself to that call. So here's where we start to define maybe the differences. So justice it's absolutely this impartiality. It's an objective sort of justice. So while there is a judgment that is being handed over, it's one that is going to be more rational. That black and white makes us suspect that there is a particular right and wrong. There are certain morals or ethics.
So that's why the sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the sword, right? And also, though, in the other hand, what does she hold?
The scale.
Right.
Yeah.
So fairness in this case, like for something to be fair, is defined by perhaps a set of ethics, rules, principles. And she doesn't look like, she is also a key in there, but she doesn't look like somebody who is going to be persuaded so much by emotion, but rather she's going to dish out or, mete out whatever justice or judgment might be fair and impartial in the moment. You feel how this is more related to our personality and our ego?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably also more of our day-to-day life as opposed to soul level decisions or transformations that are happening.
Yes. And very good. Like you're setting it up, and we'll get there in a moment. Let's also go back to what you had said before at the very beginning when we talk about justice, and let us not forget that justice actually also does refer to the justice system. I mean, if you're using a tarot card, if you're using it in a reading, it may also actually apply to, not just the justice system, but rules and regulations. Because, I mean, let's face it, our society is based on certain principles. That's what helps guide our behavior correctly. We know that we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and that there are consequences for those actions.
So I'm sensing a Capricorn energy in that need for structure and to enforce the structure.
Sure.
The rules and regulations.
Sure. And maybe even more, rather than Capricorn, excuse me, Saturn. And,
right.
What if we said like Saturn in Libra?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have that element of equity and fairness. Now, just for the listeners, this card is not actually ruled by Saturn and Libra, but we are taking the liberties of making some associations for those of you that might have any background in astrology. You can start to feel, as Turtle is, the energy of that card in that capacity. So here with Justice, you can feel that it's a little bit more accessible to the personality. It's a little bit more rigid as well. It's there's an objective approach to what is right and wrong. Now, Judgment, on the other hand, and coming back to what you said a moment ago, I think you said something along the lines of transformation and the soul changing. So here, and mind you as well that this is the second to the last card in the deck. So in the Fool's Journey, the Fool comes upon Judgment, and there is a calling or an awakening, a necessity to come home to oneself. But by what vehicle? Like, what needs to happen in that moment in order to ascend? I like the word that you used as well. What do you think?
Probably a facing of oneself, a recognizing the patterns that you may have that are not serving you or in fact inhibiting you from progress.
Yeah.
On a soul level, though, on that ability to transform and become a more enlightened person who's not adding to the egocentric world, and the drama that comes with it.
Yeah, and you used a word at the beginning that I thought when you started to describe justice, and I said, no, I think that applies more to Judgment, acceptance. So yeah, here there is a recognizing and a reckoning, if you will, that's occurring in Judgment. And it's in this moment, and again, to use your words, I think that it beautifully describes to recognize the patterns of our life, the patterns of our behavior, and how all of the decisions and the choices that we made up until that point brought us to where we are, and that the person that we've become, the person that who we are, is really just a compilation of all of those decisions and choices. Yeah. So there's this great need to accept responsibility for your life in this moment. And maybe back in Justice, where, you could say, this isn't fair, this isn't right. In Judgment, that doesn't matter anymore. It's not about like the fairness and equality of the ego. It's about accept what is and how to become enlightened in that.
Well, yeah, I see this opportunity to evolve in a way. The Judgment card is celebratory, because with acceptance means also the acceptance that you're capable of making change.
Yes.
Right? In Judgment, I suppose you could still be in a state of, when, like you said, this isn't fair.
Justice.
This isn't in Justice. You could still be in a state of, this isn't fair. You can pout and be upset that things didn't go your way, but that's not acceptance. It's not recognizing where, what you might have done to get you that hand in justice, if you will. But in Judgment, now you can see it. Or hope, I guess hopefully you're being called to anyways.
Exactly. You're being called to see it. And you're right. It is a celebratory card in the sense as well. You use the word transformation. It can be a major transformation for the soul at that point, because I think that there are several little lessons in this as well. And by little, I don't mean not by the effort of great strength do we achieve them, but forgiveness is one of those. In order for us to get to that place where we accept our lot in life, where we accept that this is who I am and this is what my life is about, it may have required a great deal of forgiveness of both, others, violators, but of ourselves. Because back in justice, where something happened to me and it was unfair, now in judgment, something happened for me and it feeds my soul's, again, to use your word, ascension or even evolution in that way. And I think the other part of judgment as well, some of those other small lessons that come with that too, is we use the word karma, unfortunately, far too often, not realizing what it actually means. But in judgment, that judgment is the card of karma. And again, not with the negative, positive karma. There's no such thing. Neither is judgment. Judgment is just a force by which to recognize or reckon one's place in the world. Oh, I got off on my soapbox there.
No, it was good.
So, kind of reflecting on that, what are you starting to see are the differences between the two?
So judgment is, when that shows up in a reading, I think you can immediately recognize here's an opportunity to notice something that is transformative on a soul level. This is a possibility for you to take a very large step in your soul evolution. And I think that hopefully you'll feel the, for lack of a better word, acceptance. You'll see it. And the hopefully is leaning more on, you'll know what the next steps are, how to bring about change. In the Justice card, it sounds like we're dealing more with either you're soon going to be faced with the consequences of something that has, a decision you've made or action you've taken, or you're in it now. And kind of like whether you like it or not, that's just how it goes. Yeah, that's justice. That was wrong, and that or someone felt it was wrong, or something to that extent. But it's, and I think there is a potential for evolution and progress in the Justice card, but
absolutely. We have to be able to, define or acknowledge what is right and wrong for us. The justice has very high ethics and principles. And so sometimes we have to make dispassionate decisions. Even, we see back in, let's say, the Hierophant, for example, which starts to teach us about certain morals and, what is correct behavior in society. But when we meet justice is where you start to define what's right and wrong for you, your particular principles in life.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense in the Fool's journey, going from, like, for example, if you look at family, when you grow up with your family, you usually kind of take on their beliefs. That's a pretty common situation anyway. Not everyone does. But, and then eventually as you start to maybe progress through puberty, or maybe even a little bit older, you start to break away from the family, start to explore your own ideas of right and wrong, what you believe in, that kind of stuff. So I guess I can see the elements of justice in there.
That's a great point. That's a great point that you're making. And I would actually argue that everyone absolutely takes on, the morals and the social pressures from their family. They might not be consciously aware of it, but in the card of justice, then that's what's so great about her sword, is that she can cut through that shit and define, what's mine, what matches, what's fair for me, what matches who I am and the kind of person that I'm becoming in the world. So we very much need justice. And that's why it's more accessible in terms of, on an ego level. Every single day we're making decisions. And when we're aware of why we're making those decisions, like now here we're reflecting back again into the Lovers card and decision-making based on values. But here with justice, we start to make decisions that sometimes are just that's what's right. That's the right thing to do. I don't want to do this, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely have a clearer understanding of the differences now.
Good. And as you said too, I want to pull this back around to judgment. So let's say in a spread also, if somebody is really asking like, a question about what would be the best course of action for me to take. What do I need to do right now? And these two cards are coming up. Justice is something that's a little bit more applicable to the moment. That person's going to need to make, decisions. And those decisions need to be based in some sense of objectivity and fairness and what's right. But in the Judgment card, those decisions are less about what's right and wrong in the moment, and rather what matches for who I am, what I stand for, who I am as a person. I mean, we use the word again, soul. And, it then is not about the actual decision that you're making, but how that impacts your growth as a human being.
Okay. So what does it look like if, for example, the Justice card comes up in a question of, what do I need to let go of, or what do I need to let die in order to see progress or to move forward?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I mean, in that case, if we stick with the idea, the logic, if you will, of justice, it might actually be that might need to let go of the notion that there is a right or wrong answer in this. And that, all the analyzing and figuring that you do, the weighing of both sides is not going to matter. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not the need per se to use your mind to figure this out as much as it is your heart to feel it out.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, because that always gets tricky. A lot of times we first think of questions that are exploratory, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what's coming up next? Or, what should I be focusing on to move forward, that kind of stuff. And then occasionally you decide to put down a spread that is really asking to highlight maybe what you need to let go of, or what might be not serving you right now, or what is negative in your life. Sometimes it can be harder to read those spreads, especially when positive, or not that necessarily Judgment or Justice are positive or negative, but especially when seemingly positive cards pop up in those, you're like, oh, well, what does that mean?
But I think that in and of itself, and that might be a great topic for another time, but even that in and of itself, like the cards aren't negative, positive, right? I mean, there's a light and a shadow to each of them, but
yeah, they're both.
But the majors in particular, we have to step out of, and this is actually great. Like, this is justice. We need to step out of that need to define something qualitatively. Right. And recognize, here's our word for judgment, and recognize that everything that happens is an important piece of our transformation, of our awakening, of our reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the great question. If you have other questions, bring them. And for those of you that are listening, I would love to answer any questions that you might have as well. So send me an email at adrian@adrianabeta.com. You can also access me on my website, but I would love to talk with you at some other point. Tarot and tea. Today it was Turtle and me.